Welcome, I'm your host, James, and today we're diving into something you've probably experienced but might have dismissed as a coincidence, those recurring numbers that seem to follow you everywhere. You know what I'm talking about. You glance at the clock and it's 11:11. Again. You pay for coffee and the total is $11.11. You're stuck in traffic behind a car with 1111 on the license plate. At some point, you start wondering, is the universe trying to tell me something, or am I just losing my mind? Today, we're exploring the phenomenon of angel numbers, those repeating numerical sequences that millions of people report seeing, and we're going to look at this through both a scientific and spiritual lens. Because here's what's fascinating, there might be more going on here than either pure coincidence or our cosmic messages. The truth, as usual, is probably more interesting than either extreme. Segment 1, the 1111 phenomenon. Let's start with the big one, 1111. If you've ever noticed this time on the clock and felt a little jolt of recognition, you're far from alone. There are entire online communities dedicated to this specific number sequence. I started researching this topic after my own experience. For weeks, I kept seeing 1111. Not just once or twice, but constantly. Receipts, timestamps on emails, license plates, random page numbers. At first, I dismissed it as confirmation bias, the psychological tendency to notice things you're already thinking about. But then I started digging into the mathematics behind pattern recognition, and I discovered something mind-blowing. Our brains are actually hardwired to seek out and recognize numerical patterns. Researchers at Stanford conducted studies on how humans process numerical information, and they found that certain number combinations activate specific neural pathways associated with attention and memory. We're not just randomly noticing these patterns, our brains are literally designed to find them. And here's where it gets really interesting. These patterns aren't just in our heads. They're everywhere in nature. Take the Fibonacci sequence, that mathematical pattern where each number is the sum of the two before it, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. This sequence shows up in the spiral arrangement of sunflower seeds, the branching of trees, the curve of nautilus shells, the structure of pine cones, and even the formation of galaxies. It's like the universe has a signature and it's written in mathematics. Ancient civilizations recognized these patterns thousands of years ago. The Greeks built the Parthenon using what they called the golden ratio, a mathematical relationship derived from the Fibonacci sequence. The Egyptians incorporated similar mathematical principles into the pyramids. These weren't primitive people making lucky guesses, they were observing fundamental patterns in nature and incorporating them into their architecture and art. So when we talk about seeing repeating numbers, we're tapping into something much deeper than modern digital anxiety. We're connecting with patterns that have been recognized throughout human history. Segment 2, what the numbers mean. Now, let's talk about what these specific number sequences are supposed to mean, according to numerological traditions. And before the skeptics tune out, stay with me, because even if you don't believe in metaphysical explanations, there's still fascinating psychology and neuroscience at work here. 1111, in numerology, this is considered one of the most powerful combinations. It's associated with awakening, spiritual insight, and new opportunities. The number 11 is called a master number, representing intuition and enlightenment. When it appears doubled, that significance is amplified. 222, this sequence represents balance, harmony, and partnership. It's often interpreted as a sign that you're on the right path and that things are aligning in your favor. 333, associated with creativity, growth, and self-expression. Many people report seeing this number during periods of personal expansion or when they're being called to embrace their authentic selves. 444 represents foundation, stability, and grounding. It's often seen as a reassuring sign that you're supported and protected. 555, this is considered a harbinger of major life changes and transformation. Many people report seeing this number sequence right before or during significant transitions. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Quantum physicists have found that certain number sequences appear repeatedly in wave functions and particle interactions. These aren't random, they're points where seemingly chaotic systems show unexpected order. In chaos theory, these are called strange attractors, points where complex, dynamic systems gravitate towards certain patterns despite appearing random. It's like the universe naturally tends towards certain numerical relationships. So these ancient spiritual concepts about special numbers might actually have some basis in modern physics. The patterns our ancestors intuited might reflect real mathematical relationships that govern how reality itself operates. Segment 3. Technology and Perception. Now, skeptics often argue that the angel number phenomenon is just a product of our digital age. We're surrounded by digital displays, phones, computers, microwaves, car dashboards, so of course we see more numbers than people did in the past. And there's some truth to that. We are exposed to numerical information constantly in ways that previous generations weren't. But here's the thing, even in pre-digital societies, people reported similar numerical synchronicities. Indigenous cultures around the world developed complex numerological systems. Medieval European mystics wrote extensively about meaningful numbers. Ancient Chinese philosophy centers around numerical relationships in the I Ching. These patterns transcend technology. They're not just a modern phenomenon created by smartphone screens. What technology has done is make these patterns more visible and more frequent. But the human tendency to find meaning in numerical patterns? That's been with us for thousands of years. And there's actually solid psychological research backing this up. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, spent decades studying what he called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too significant to be random. Jung proposed that synchronicity represents a connection between the psychological state of the observer and external events. In other words, when you're in a particular mental or emotional state, you become attuned to certain patterns in your environment that reflect or respond to that state. Recent research in neuroscience supports this idea. Studies show that when we pause to notice patterns, whether it's recurring numbers or any other synchronicity, we activate parts of our brain associated with insight and creative problem solving. It's like these numbers are giving us permission to step back from our automatic, habitual thinking and engage more deeply with the present moment. Segment 4. The Psychology of Meaning Making. So let's talk about what's really happening when you see 1111 for the 5th time this week and get that weird feeling in your stomach. From a psychological perspective, there are several things going on. First, pattern recognition. Our brains are prediction machines. We're constantly scanning our environment for patterns that might be meaningful or useful. This kept our ancestors alive. Recognizing patterns meant spotting predators, finding food sources, predicting weather. When you start noticing a pattern like 1111, your brain essentially tags it as a potentially significant and starts filtering for it more actively. This isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's how we learn and adapt. Second, the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion. This is when something you've recently noticed suddenly seems to appear everywhere. You learn a new word, and suddenly everyone's using it. You consider buying a specific car, and now you see it on every street. This isn't the universe conspiring, it's your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information for relevance. Once something is tagged as important, you notice it more. Third, meaning-making. Humans are storytelling creatures. We don't just observe events, we create narratives around them. When we see repeating numbers, especially during emotionally significant times, our brains naturally seek to create meaning. This isn't weakness or delusion, it's a fundamental aspect of human consciousness. We understand the world through stories and symbols. But here's the really interesting part. Research shows that this meaning-making process can actually be beneficial, regardless of whether there's some cosmic truth behind it. Studies on people who pay attention to synchronicities, including recurring numbers, show that they tend to have enhanced self-reflection, greater mindfulness, improved decision-making, stronger sense of purpose, better intuition. Why? Because these moments act as mindfulness triggers. They pull you out of autopilot and make you pause to consider where you are and where you're going. Segment 5. The Practical Approach. So how do we make sense of all this? Are angel numbers real cosmic messages, or are they just psychological phenomena? Here's my take, that might be the wrong question. What if the value of these patterns isn't in proving or disproving their supernatural origin, but in how we use them? Think of it this way: whether 1111 is a message from angels, a quantum fluctuation, or just your brain's pattern recognition system firing, the practical impact is the same. It's a moment that captures your attention and creates space for reflection. When you see that number, you have a choice. You can dismiss it as meaningless and keep scrolling through your phone. Get anxious about what it means and spiral into worry. Use it as a mindfulness bell, a reminder to check in with yourself. That third option? That's where the real magic happens. Try this the next time you see a repeating number sequence. Pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, what was I just thinking about? How am I feeling right now? What's my current life direction? What decision am I struggling with? What would I do if I trusted myself completely? Use these moments as opportunities for self-inquiry. Keep a journal. Note when these numbers appear and what's happening in your life. Look for patterns not just in the numbers, but in the contexts where they appear. You might discover that you see 555 when you're contemplating change but afraid to act. Or that 222 appears when you're doubting a decision that's actually aligned with your values. Or that 1111 shows up when you're about to have an important insight but you're distracted. The numbers become a personalized feedback system, regardless of their ultimate origin. Segment 6, the bigger picture. Here's what I find most compelling about all this: we're living in an era where the boundaries between science and spirituality are becoming more porous. Quantum physics reveals a universe far stranger than our everyday experience suggests, where observation affects reality, where particles can be in multiple states simultaneously, where seemingly separate things are mysteriously connected. Neuroscience is discovering that consciousness isn't just a passive observer of reality but an active participant in creating our experienced world. Psychology is validating ancient wisdom about the power of intention, attention, and meaning. In this context, angel numbers sit right at the intersection of all these fields. They're mathematical patterns, science; neurological phenomena, psychology; spiritual symbols, mysticism; tools for self-development, practical application. They don't require you to abandon scientific thinking to find value in them. But they also don't require you to dismiss thousands of years of human spiritual experience as primitive superstition. Maybe the most mature approach is to hold both possibilities lightly. To say, I don't know if these numbers are messages from the universe, but I know they're meaningful to me. I don't know if there's a cosmic intelligence guiding my attention, but I know that paying attention makes me more conscious and intentional. That's not wishy-washy, that's intellectually honest. It's saying, I'm humble enough to admit I don't have all the answers, but I'm wise enough to use what works. So here's my challenge to you: for the next week, pay attention to the numbers around you. Not obsessively, not anxiously, just with gentle curiosity. When you notice a repeating sequence, whether it's 1111, 222, 333, or any pattern that catches your eye, pause. Breathe. Reflect. Don't worry about what it means according to some numerology website. Ask yourself what it means to you in that moment. Use these patterns as invitations to become more present, more aware, more intentional. And here's the beautiful thing: whether these numbers are cosmic breadcrumbs leading you toward your destiny, or simply your brain's pattern recognition system doing its job, the outcome is the same. You become more conscious, more reflective, more connected to your own inner wisdom. That's the real magic. We're just scratching the surface of understanding the relationship between mathematics, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. These recurring numbers might be breadcrumbs leading us toward something profound, not answers, but better questions. What if reality is more participatory than we thought? What if consciousness and cosmos are more intimately connected than our current scientific paradigm allows? What if ancient wisdom and modern science are both pointing toward truths that transcend either? I don't know. But I'm paying attention to the patterns. And that attention itself is transforming how I move through the world. Maybe that's the message all along. Thanks for joining me today on Patterns in the Noise. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who keeps seeing 1111. Leave a review telling me what number patterns you've been noticing. And most importantly, stay curious. Until next time, keep looking for patterns. But remember, you're not just observing them. You're part of them.